Good afternoon, esteemed traders and investors. Today is Friday, January 16th. I present to your attention another market review for Insta Forex. As always, I am glad to be here with you today. So, there was a good movement in the dollar. Yesterday, the dollar strengthened a bit. Several of our trading ideas worked out, and we will discuss them with you on the chart. Let's get started. So, let's begin with gold quotes, which are entering a 4-hour triangle after a hypergrowth at the start of the week. An interesting situation is developing, not in favor of the buyers, because they haven't been squeezed out all week. And even with the significant financial news updates we have received throughout the course of the past 2 trading days, the key price level at $45 and $80 remained firm and was not broken. And it still hasn't been, by the way. It's still in this unbroken state. So, neither inflation nor the initial claims managed to break through these highs, but I think it would make sense if today, being the last day of the week, we at least break through 4,581, and then possibly go a little lower, of course. So, I expect an exit from this giant triangle, which looks like a dragon's head, to the downside, at the very least, a complex breakout aimed at capturing the liquidity of buyers who have been buying all week. For some reason, they aren't touching the historical edges on this instrument, so we wait. Even if it's a small downward move, we expect a movement to the downside. Exactly how far could it go at most, and what should we look for? Well, first of all, that's another significant weekly low. That level is 4,569 for us. And the second point is the mark of 4,562, which is the absolute low from Monday. And right below that, there's a clean mirror level at 4,500, or you could say from 4,500 to 4,450. Therefore, the maximum target here is to reach the nearest technical support level, the classic one, right at the support area. In this case, it's a mirror level. The euro-US dollar pair dropped, just as we expected. Let me remind you, there was a trading idea for a downward move. I mentioned that last week's low and the low from one of December's impulse weeks should be broken, so the instrument dropped and continues to stay down. It's possible that we'll go down further, right to the trendline support, and sooner or later, we might even break through it, so the downward movement is logical and justified. There was a noticeable amount of activity here, though not much, but the instrument executed its movement and did so in a very technical and precise manner. Even if you traded from the short breakdown zones with a stop of 200 and a profit of 600, that's a 3-to-1 ratio. So the British pound US dollar pair was more pleasing because the potential for movement here was greater. Let me remind you, the idea was to move down from the strong pin bar last week, aiming to capture liquidity. Also, over the past 3 weeks, my friends, it happened. The instrument broke through everything we needed it to. Now it's correcting into the nearest short breakdown zone, from where, by the way, the downward movement could very well continue. And here, by the way, with a stop of about 300, the take profit was 800, again, roughly 3-to-1. The Australian dollar is the most mysterious one. I would say that it's an instrument that hasn't yet reclaimed its previous levels and is still trying to lure in buyers. Let me remind you that here, the trading idea remains exactly the same as with the previous majors, but it simply hasn't played out quite yet. Accordingly, this gives us a significant margin of approximately 500 points for updating the lows of last week and the week before at the 0.666 level. Let's call these 3 sixes just that. That's why there was only a small move yesterday, downward, but these lows weren't broken, and that's very strange.
Looking for real trading advantages? InstaForex offers the lowest spreads and commissions. On major currency pairs, our conditions are better. Lower spreads and only $5 commission instead of $7. That's real savings for every trader. And now, let's get back to the market review.
Dollar Canadian is also gradually freezing at its nearest resistance as shown on the daily time frame. Let me remind you that there is a plan here for a very strong move down, for a weakening of the US dollar. You need to understand that this could happen with a fairly high probability as well. Well, but there are also zones for selling here. So for this instrument, this is the short breakdown zone. There is plenty of liquidity both near and far below. You can participate here. Unfortunately, from the current prices, you'll have to set a large stop at 2,000. I don't know anyone who can set stop losses that are quite that large, so if you're lucky, you can try to look for a trading opportunity. you can enter a bit higher or lower the time frame and analyze the candles there to try to enter with a short stop to the downside. Dollar yen. The dollar yen is closing out the trading week. By the way, the instrument closed with a decline, completing its three-wave structure. I mentioned that this would happen sooner or later, and it happened sooner. The only thing is, of course, they didn't give good prices for selling, but you can see that in this instrument as well. The US dollar started to decline, and that's not a very good sign for those holding short positions on the Australian dollar. This suggests that the United States dollar could still continue to gain strength, but in any case, the three-wave move has already fully completed its course here. As for the current situation regarding oil, I forecasted in my analysis yesterday, and I can now say that it has indeed happened. The upward movement continued, and over the last 4 hours the instrument has been growing actively, indicating that the support level is of interest to oil traders. This is the specific zone from which the financial instrument can rise quite actively and significantly. And those who bought at the precise level I mentioned have already secured a profit of $1 out of the 4 that the instrument could potentially gain in a variety of different market scenarios. There are, of course, a wide variety of specialized analytical systems designed for predicting future economic growth. Well, the primary and most significant underlying driver of the steady growth of this particular financial instrument is, my friends and fellow observers, the various antics of the raging Donald Trump and the significant downward movement in the price of oil. We had a sudden halt in all movements due to yet another Iranian incident. But the final word hasn't been said there yet, so the upward movement may continue. Basically, those who bought in, well done. And for those looking to save, you can look for careful long breakouts and try to catch some bullish moves here on the smaller time frames, some kind of bullish impulses. By the way, the downward movement during Trump's actions, when he cancelled military operations in Iran, was very interesting and well formed. A downward impulse, a pullback exactly into a short breakdown. With a stop of 0.70, you could have made almost $3. Bitcoin performed beautifully this week, hitting the three-wave structure. Congrats to those who participated. For now, there are no trading ideas.
I also want to remind you that every InstaForex client automatically receives loss insurance. For every $1 of compensation, only $4 of your friend's investments are required. Just submit a request, and your losses will be recovered. Let's continue with the review.
US indices S&P 500, Nasdaq are growing. Everything is moving up step by step through long breakouts, especially with the Nasdaq. Those who paid attention to the Nasdaq could have caught it from the long breakout, but most likely you didn't set a buy limit order. You didn't set it after all. Dollar franc continues to move sideways, and basically the dollar franc is closing out its trading idea. It's not a bearish bar which suggests that the strengthening of the dollar here or the weakening of the franc could happen across a broad front. For 3 weeks, this instrument hasn't closed in the positive, Canadian dollar to franc. From this instrument, I'm further interested in grids. By the way, there are 3 here as well. The wave structure is visible on the weekly time frame, and we could very well see another upward wave. And then a very strong trend could start, one that might break this entire short trend that's been going on for several years. For this instrument, as well as Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, I'm further interested in grids. If the current year's high is broken, the grid of limit sell orders with a 500 step will be put in place.
With InstaForex, you can triple your profit. For every $4 of your friend's investments, you automatically get an extra $1 added to your profit, with no extra conditions.
The franc, like all franc pairs, where the franc is the quoted currency, is forming a 3-wave structure aiming to update the highs, at least those of November and December last year. The Australian and New Zealand dollars are starting to correct. Those who went short did well. For those who didn't, set up a grid of limit sell orders with a hold above the high of the current year. Step 500. As a reminder, Euro-Australian dollar has moved 12,000 points from last year's highs. Of course, it has had even bigger impulses, up to 20,000 points, but I think once it reaches 15,000 points, we can start taking positions in the opposite direction. There are 3,000 points left, and we'll begin going long. Euro-Canadian dollar is closing the week again without any clear direction, so we'll wait for it to go higher and won't touch it for now.
We also have a great offer. Fund your account and get a 30% tradable bonus. Trade with additional capital and expand your opportunities with InstaForex.
As for silver, pay attention, it's holding the short breakdown zone, and actually not just once, so it could very well correct lower. After the hyper growth, the week is closing with a bullish bar. Of course, this doesn't mean that everything has stopped here yet. Movement. But the size of the bars is just astonishing in its volatility. We've never seen anything like this in silver before. I hope this is the climax. Friends, InstaForex offers a free consultation with a personal trading consultant. Follow the link in the video description, fill out the callback form, and gain access to exclusive offers and special trading conditions. BRT Plus for risk-free trading. That's all. Trade with InstaForex, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for new reviews.